So, welcome to this episode of the podcast where we're talking all about how I or my guest built their business. And that guest is Mr. Jewade Graham from Jewade Graham Coaching. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure.
No worries, my friend. So, for full transparency, Jewade is one of my one-to-one clients. So I know his business pretty well, and we have been on a journey for it's over a year now, right? It's a bit longer than a year.
Probably like eight
Um,
long.
yeah. Don't make it sound bad. Um,
No, good long.
a good long time. Um, so over that course of that period of time, there have been lots of things that have gone well, a few that haven't gone well, and some stuff in between. And the purpose of this series of podcasts is to give people the real honest truth about what it's like to build a business. The fact that for most people, Jawade and myself included, it's not plain sailing. It's not a point of I started here at this point, at this dream, and then I wanted to get to this specific financial income, and it was just a plain sailing to get there. There was lots of stuff to figure out and dead ends and wrong turns to take. So that's kind of what we're going to attempt to achieve on this episode of the show. So a little bit of context then, my friend. Just tell people who haven't come across your profile yet a 30-second rundown of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a part-time everything. So part-time
Cleaner.
online coach, part-time cleaner, part-time online coach, predominantly coach personal trainers now. I do keep my toe dipped in to the in-person stuff with general population. I'm a mentor as well. And then all the other fitness business stuff, social media, content creator, admin assistant, all of the above,
Accountant. Yeah.
accountant, everything, but predominantly online coach for personal trainers and mentor to personal trainers.
Cool. And I guess that's a good starting point is that you mentioned there that you have a toe in the water with the online side of things and you're working with other PTs and helping them with their own transformations as well as mentoring at the same time. But you're also maintaining in-person clients as well. You have the opportunity, if you wish, to go fully online. So I guess the first question is with I would imagine a lot of PTs wanting to go online. Why do you feel it's important for you to maintain an in-person business as well and not just ditch that altogether?
Yeah, there's a couple of main reasons for me. The first one is being relevant to my client base. So a
Mhm.
lot of personal trainers that I work with, they're in person. Some of them are online as well, but the majority are in person. So for me to keep relevant, I feel more authentic if I still have some in-person clients. So I'm still facing the same problems. Like it's not just, oh, your clients are PTs now. It's
Mhm.
all amazing. Like, no, I deal with people that don't have food logs, that struggle with kids and X, Y, Z. So
Mhm.
it keeps me feeling a little bit relevant. And the second thing for me is one of the reasons why I became self-employed was to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So for me, I still enjoy personal training. So if I can, which I do, I'll incorporate some of that. So it's not about having not the easy
Mhm.
life, but having a life where I'm online if I still enjoy personal training. Like the reason I've done this was so I could do what I want. And what I want to do at the moment is a little bit of personal training. So like it helps fulfill both ends of the spectrum, like doing what I enjoy, but then at the same time being
Mhm.
relevant to my client base as well. So those are the two main reasons why I still do both.
Yeah, it makes sense because especially with personal training, as with many other different industries as well, is that each client throws up a different set of challenges, problems. They, in a personal training context, may not quote unquote get it quite like another client does. Maybe they bring a different set of injuries or something like that, or different goals, or all of the above. And therefore, I guess from your perspective, if you're working personally, in person with multiple different clients all the time, all these different things, is that you're exposing yourself to lots of the different challenges that your PT clients would face, right?
Yeah, massively. And it's it's keeping me relevant, like
Hmm.
again, keeping me up to date. But also, I don't come across as much of a people person, but I am at heart. Like it gives me an opportunity to like have different conversations with different people, as you
Yeah, yeah.
said. Like there are people that work in so many different fields, and online is great. But for me, at the moment, like yes, we can have Zoom and video
Hmm.
conferences and everything else, but you can't beat or replicate that in-person stuff where you're
Hmm.
actually 2 feet away from someone having a conversation. It goes a little bit deeper than what you can, in my opinion, on the screen.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And for me personally, it's like I didn't always do one-to-one and group coaching and things like that. I kind of stuck with courses, newsletters, stuff like that, where I didn't have to talk to people because I'm an introvert at heart. But then I felt like I was missing some of that, as you call it, like relevancy. And the more that I work with people one to one, it really kind of influences the courses that I create. It influences the content that I make because I'm closer to the specific problems. I'm literally having that conversation with my ideal clients and hearing their problems firsthand. And that's been so much better for me to hear it that way than it would be to make a lot of assumptions or ask people to fill out a survey or do a little type form video, ask a little bit of feedback or whatever. It's just not quite the same as talking to someone face to face. And I guess for you as well, like that's like the same thing is it influences everything you do because you kind of like at the coalface or in the trenches, as people say, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like I just brought out a course, and like it's to help personal trainers go from little or zero clients to getting a couple of clients and getting a result. And
Hmm.
that's not theory. That's literally the principles that I've applied and I'm still applying today to get the results that I do. So if literally just for that, it makes it worthwhile because I can speak from a place of not do as I say, but this is my experience
Yeah.
multiple times, it can help you. And it's like you only really get that when you're doing what you say you're doing, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Makes total sense. So let's switch to the online stuff. Let's switch to a little bit of social media. Now, if you can cast your mind back to when you were pre me and we hadn't started working together, like many other online coaches, probably listening to this podcast, there was a point where you just decided to start doing something on social media. So in those, and it might not be like the first day you started, but in the early days, like what were you doing to try and generate some form of interest, growth, whatever you want to call it? Like, what was your approach and mentality back in the day, if you can remember that far back?
Yeah, I can actually because it wasn't that long ago. But it was pretty straightforward. I was just posting results.
Okay.
So there was nothing, there was no anything. It was literally just a result, a result, a result, a result. And
Mhm.
you might think like, because a lot of times people say, show people that you can do what you say you can and you've got a business. No, you haven't. I know that much, you haven't. So like literally posting results and yes, you'd get a couple of likes, but in terms of building a sustainable system for inquiries, that wasn't there.
Mhm.
And we'll probably go into that in a little while, so I won't go into it now, but from adding other principles, that's when you start to gain some traction. So for me, to begin with, I thought literally just be good at what you do and the floodgates will open. And my experience then
Mhm.
tells me you can be good at what you do, you need to, but then you also need a couple of other ingredients as well as that.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. And like, I think the bit about being good at what you do, that's kind of like a prerequisite. Because if you're not good at what you do, you're going to get nowhere. Well, you might get somewhere, but you'll get found out very, very quickly. But the thing about just posting, say, for example, like transformation pictures and stuff like that, is there needs to be that other type of content. Like people may get sold, quote unquote, by the transformation post, but it might not be what brings them to your page in the first place. So you kind of obviously, as you know now, is you need a little mix of that. So then at some point, I would imagine, because I know this from seeing your content, is you did start to post different stuff before we started to work together. So then I imagine you probably, I don't know whether you worked with somebody else or you took some courses or you just looked around what everyone else was doing on social media. So what was your kind of approach in terms of, I guess, trying to give more value in that sort of in between period of starting and then, doing what we've been doing?
Yeah, like it's not too different to what I do now. I think the difference is now is I have more direction and more guidance and
Hmm.
someone to hold me accountable for the stuff that I don't do.
Hmm.
But yeah, like the what I've tried to do and always try to do is just give my experience and opinion. I've obviously become a little bit better in communicating that in a way that people now are receptive to. But
Yep.
essentially, I've just been doing that, and it's literally been kind of like pissing in the wind, for lack of a better term, seeing what sticks
Yeah, yeah,
to begin with. But then now it's like, okay, then there's a structure and a format to if I do X, then Y happens.
yeah. Hmm.
But essentially, the message has always been similar or the same. It's like, this is what I do to get results, or this is how you can get results. Admittedly, beforehand, when I didn't have a niche, or the keyword niche, I
Hmm.
was just speaking to everybody, which meant I was speaking to nobody. But essentially, it was still the same thing, it's just without all the fancy packaging and wrappers that go with
Sure.
successful content.
Yeah. And I think that's important for listeners to kind of understand that like thought process or that like that process that you went through. So when you were first decided to post something on social media, it was just, okay, bang, I'm a good coach who gets great results. So let's just start sharing that stuff. Okay, that didn't quite work as planned. So I'll go and give more value as that the Gary V-ism might be. And so you'd give that value, but the value lacks a structure and a system and a process behind it. And that doesn't quite get you where you want to be. And then you kind of start to put some more structure around it. And then lo and behold, things start to move forward. So I think that those people who are maybe listening to this and they're in that position of they're in like the give value trap, let's call it, is that you can't just give value and have nothing else. Because yes, you might get a few inquiries, but it kind of needs has to have some sort of direction about, well, why am I giving this value? Who am I giving this value to? Why would I give this value to that person? And what else might they need? And what would get them to onto my email list? And what would make them want to reach out and, you know, ask me a question about my coaching program or whatever. It needs to be a little bit more than that. Um, so I had another question about the early days, and maybe you want to divulge or not. I don't know. It's up to you. Um, are there any like things that you did back in the day that you look back and you think, like, that's so cringe? Like, I wish I'd never done that. Like, have you been in the? I can't imagine knowing you for well over a year now. I can't imagine you were one of those guys who did the dancing and pointing on reels and stuff like. I can't imagine you being that. But did you do any like cringy stuff that you now think, Jesus, why did I do that?
Nah, I didn't, and that's probably why I didn't
Were you
post.
just too
Like,
scared to post? So
yeah, I was like, I'm not gonna point my fingers and dance. So I'd rather do nothing and just post results, kind of thing. And then like when I did start posting, it was literally just a square box with a bit of text. And I was like, for me, having my technological skills at the moment, like still not the best. That was like top for me. It was like, yes, I've mastered Canva.
yeah.
And like it was like that was, but for me, like where I was at the time, that was content creation. It was
Hmm.
say a message. It For me, it looks fancy. It doesn't. If you go back far enough, it
Yeah, yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
look fancy. But would I say that that was cringy? No, I didn't. I've never succumbed to like the trends that other
Hmm.
people may do, and I feel like that's part of the reason why I'm successful now. Like it's not happened overnight, but I've been able to do it in a way that's stayed true to me and
Hmm.
not been drawn into all the other stuff that you see that comes and goes kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I actually, you mentioned the technical stuff. I did actually write down a question about your technical ability. So it's a good segue into that, right? So, as you just admitted, you're not exactly a tech whiz, right? And a lot of people, like I was having a conversation with a one-to-one client last week, I think it was, or maybe the week before, and they were very technically not gifted, shall we say. And it was to the point at which like they just didn't want to make a video. They just couldn't deal with the frustration of the hassle of being able to do all of this camera stuff and what have you. So being as though technical stuff is a little bit of a limitation for you, have you kind of like developed a specific approach to making videos, for example, that make it like very low tech, but still get you a result? Like, how have you kind of worked around your technical insufficiencies?
Yeah, the first thing I did, and it was based off a conversation with you. So like I create barriers for myself. So I wasn't posting videos because my
Hmm.
camera was terrible. Go and get a good camera. So the first thing I did was invest in, at the time, which was a new, I think it's a 14. I invested in an iPhone Pro. But for me, that removed the barrier of it's a terrible camera. So
Yeah, yeah.
with that barrier now removed, it was literally just a case of record. And for me to keep someone's attention and my own, I had to have it structured. So I would write out a script of everything that I needed to say, and I would say a sentence, record that sentence probably 3 or 4 times, chop it, next sentence, so on and so forth. And then when I've got the end product, I would literally cut sentence by sentence by sentence and then
Mhm.
put that together. And it sounds so straightforward and so kind of Neanderthal, but it works because like
Yeah, yeah.
at first you could see where I cut. Now you can probably still see where I cut, but it's a lot more fluent because I've practiced how to speak and how
Sure.
to start a sentence and end a sentence. But
Yeah.
literally, it was a case of, for me, the barriers were I'm not very good at structuring my sentences, like in
Hmm.
a way that's concise, not very technical in terms of my camera's terrible. So remove those two barriers. And then it was literally for for me, how I am and how social media is, get your message across in the least amount of time. And that, again, that came from some conversations back and forth with yourself about how's the best way to do that.
Hmm. And you've also got a couple of like different like post stars. Like the ones that spring to mind is you do the one where you've got a little bit of video and there's like a question box on it, or you have ones where like you have like a series which is your 15-second anatomy and stuff like that. I imagine that they are very low tech things. Like there's not like a huge amount of editing and splicing and fancy transitions and stuff like that, right? It's just basically a bit of video of you sometimes talking and a way of engaging with your audience, right?
Yeah, literally, it's that like the equipment is iPhone camera, tripod, and is it a road mic? A mic. I'm not gonna give a name, a
Yeah, yeah,
mic, and that's essentially and a skeleton for the anatomy. That's all I use.
yeah, yeah.
And the question box thing, like again, that came from just needing a quick piece of content that was still valuable, still create engagement, but didn't
Mhm.
take too much time from me. And I think that came from a conversation with yourself as well. And it was like, how do I keep it very minimalistic for me whilst giving the maximum from people? So it's like, well, anatomy, we don't need to go into the science because that's not what Instagram is. It's a platform for
Mhm.
quick visual aid. So we'll give them a quick visual aid. If it's the question box, how can I spark somebody to stop scrolling, click a button? They might not like it, but they still click a button, drop a comment, interact in some way, because that would then help more people to see it and bring more people to my page. So like in
Mhm.
terms of technology, very little. In terms of time, now, very little. Now that I'm used to editing and chopping up
Mhm.
whatever I need to.
Yeah, because I remember I don't remember the verbatim conversation, but I remember us talking about the fact that I think at some point, like trying to be consistent was one of your barriers. A little bit like you said, the technology or I haven't got the good camera was a barrier as well. And the thinking that, okay, I've got to create this video which has to be really elaborate with all these edits and zooms and all this stuff going on. And then when you think about it, is that there are simple ways to make content. And again, like tackling that barrier is a great way to get creative. So, for example, I just literally just started writing about it in the newsletter for April. Is that I'm in a self-imposed experiment right now where I've kind of said to myself that because a lot of people say that they don't like talking on camera, right? And every time I put up a question box, or most of the time I put a question box in Instagram, someone will ask, I hate talking on camera. Can I still build an audience or can I still build a business, right? Most of the time I just say yes. But then I thought, right, okay, prove it. So for 6 weeks, I'm going to not say a single word on Instagram, stories, content, whatever. And what that's done is that's forced me to think about different ways of making content. So that sort of restriction, or in your case, that kind of like barrier creates it forces some creativity. So if people are struggling with, I don't know whether it is talking on camera or making things too long, like put a restriction on yourself, like overcome that barrier, and it will lead to different ways of being creative. So for like you've some of those posts have got like hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of views, and of what your following is now far in excess of mine, which is very embarrassing. But there we go. But yeah, those simple ways of making content, I think, have been really advantageous for you. And so let's talk about the following, right? So um, talk us through how that kind of like happened, because I think when we started working together, you maybe had like 900 followers, and I think I looked at it just earlier before we popped on 19.2, I think I saw.
Yeah.
Um, so I talk people through that, because I think it's important for people to understand that did not happen in week one or even month one. So talk people through like how that transition happened.
Yeah, I think like it's plays into the age-old quote, like you just gotta be consistent. Like what you spoke about just about the consistency. Like when I say I speak concise now, that wasn't me starting concise. That was me starting recording 50-second videos, editing with you, going back and forth, making them shorter, but
Mhm.
keeping the value or keeping the message there. And that didn't happen in any amount. It was months and months and months. So literally, like I was on 900 followers when I first started working with you, and I got to just over 1,000 in the space of probably 7, 8 months. But for me, even now, I don't really care about the following. Like it's
Mhm.
good for your ego, but it means nothing if it doesn't. I mean, for business. But so bearing that in mind, like again, when I say I wasn't going in for the trends, that meant I could just refine my message and not
Mhm.
deviate from that. Yes, I'm able to communicate the message better, but I think I seen the most growth probably after it's probably about a bang on a year.
Mm.
So and go on, carry on.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, like, I guess like the important thing, like what you just basically said, is that you haven't kind of gone chasing trends. You haven't kind of like flicked around different formats and said, "Oh, that's like flavor of the month. I'm gonna go do that." Or everyone's talking about this topic, so I'm gonna go talk about that. Is that you just kind of stuck on this like same vein for well over a year, and what the focus has been on is keep getting better at that thing or those topics that you talk about. You're not trying to, you know, go and often do all these trendy things or trying to impress someone just for followers and likes like that. You just kind of just done your thing. And then as you've got better at the communication of your core message, those people have come to you. And I think that's like the key thing that is like worth remembering, is that yeah, you didn't panic and go and feel like you have to go and change everything and start chasing trends and stuff like that. It was right. Okay, cool. I know what I want to do, and I know what I believe in, and like what gives you what what's um you would define as integrity in terms of your content and stuff like that, and what's outside that. Stuck to that, got better at doing that, and then a year and a half later, you're pushing 20,000 followers, right?
And I think as well, it's important to note as well, like it's about being consistent. But then when I found what worked, it was like, all right, then double down on that.
Mhm.
And then it was like double down on that meant that I could then find out what's worked. So that 15-second anatomy was the one of the first videos that kind of blew up. And it was like, okay, then now I've seen that. I'm not just going to stop that. I'm going to try different methods of that. So it's like 15-second
Mhm.
anatomy, 15-second nutrition, and some of it didn't. Some of it didn't work. But once I found that format, it was like, okay, then 15 seconds is the key
Mhm.
point, and then that's where the question thing came because that took then 6 seconds, which meant I could get to a point a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
And it's just once you found something, kind of
Mhm.
recognizing that you found something, and then not being afraid to double down on that a little bit more.
Yeah, and I guess like you probably wouldn't have stumbled across that format if you hadn't have been like in this like mindset of refining. Like if you were off trying to, chase the latest trend or whatever, you would have probably missed that, because those like that 15-second thing and so on and so forth, that came from like think if I remember right, you did a video about bicep um, curls with a barbell, and you were talking about carrying angle and stuff like that, right? And that did maybe 13 or 14,000, I think. Testing my memory. Um, and then versus all the other content that you produced, that stuck out. Like, okay, people have resonated with you talking about exercise mechanics in a bit more detail. So, okay, let's explore that a little bit more. And then, okay, cool. So now and then I guess like the evolution of that came, well, the 15-second anatomy was the evolution of that several times over. But if you'd have kind of just gone off and done something completely different, then you'd have missed that refining process and you've missed that opportunity. So I think important that, again, like I think one of the things that is good about how you've approached it is that you know, a lot of people say that they have a long-term view of things, where actually they really actually crave immediate payback. Whereas I think you've generally just had this very, very long-term approach and putting the effort in early on. And I know there's some analogy about seeds and trees and stuff like that, but it will skip that. But that the point being is that you did have this genuinely long-term approach, and now that is what's paying off. And I think that if more people took that approach rather than kind of get to 10K in the next 30 days, they'd probably
Yeah.
actually get to 10K faster. But
And like, because even when I started working with yourself, like I didn't know how long, I didn't envision working with you for a year plus, but I didn't have a time limit on it. And I didn't have any expectations of I'm going to get a financial return.
Mhm.
My thought process was I'm going to learn how to social media market.
Yeah, do it
So
properly.
at some point, if I get good at that and I'm good at what I do, then the money will come. But I didn't
Mhm.
think, Simon, you've got 3 months to get me a 10K month, and I'm not happy. That's on
Yeah.
me then. It's like,
Yeah.
well, if this person is way further than me in this aspect, if I
Mhm.
can take some time to learn from them and then take some time to apply it to what works for me, then however long it takes, it takes. But when I get there, then I'm going to start to reap the rewards of that. And that's literally what I'm starting to see now. Like it's
Mhm.
because I get people that have recently followed me or recently noticed that I've got a big following and they're like, oh, and I'm like, nah, it's literally just come like overnight. But that
Mhm.
overnight was a year in the making. It wasn't like,
Yeah, yeah,
it's like
exactly.
straight away kind of thing.
So now you're kind of like we kind of like on your little journey thing. We've gone from okay, where when you first went on social media, it was kind of a little bit of a post and hope till now you've got some direction, they've refined it, and the following's grown, and the business has grown alongside with that. What would you say, like looking back over that entire process, what have you found to have been the most hardest thing to get right that is actually kind of working for you right now? It might not be exactly where you want it to be, but what's been the hardest thing to kind of get your head around and try to master?
Is that in terms of social media or the business as a whole?
Either go down whichever route you want.
Yeah, so because one of the things I remember and like some of our conversations stick with me because I do it now and I didn't necessarily do it then. But like one of the big things was being having multiple touch points. So that was
Hmm.
emails, social media, building authority on podcasts and things like that. And when I first arrived into your orbit, like I wasn't ready for any of that. So it was literally for me just one thing, which was Instagram and social media.
Yeah.
And when you were urging me to branch out, I was a little bit resistant. I did it because I'm like,
Mhm.
well, I'm paying this person money, so I need to do what they say. um, so I did it, but like sometimes I didn't really understand why I was doing it. But I
Yeah.
had a full circle moment, like literally a week ago now, and that's what made me remember our conversation from many moon ago. And like I've got a course out, someone bought the course, but how it happened it solidified why you were saying what you say because
Hmm.
so I started a podcast because you said to me getting other people's podcasts and I was like,
Hmm.
I'm not fucking DMing people, can't do that. So the alternative and again, removing the barrier was if I don't
Yeah.
want to DM people, you'll start your own.
Sure.
So I started my own and then I put a podcast out the other week and someone DM'd me and they DM me saying I'm gonna listen to the podcast, looking forward to it. They
Hmm.
said, "How have you been?" So me, little cheeky plug. Oh, I'm doing quite well. I've just built a course out. It's taking all my time, but I'm really happy with how it's finished.
Yeah.
Their response was, "Ah, I saw that. I've got an email from you. I'll read it now." They went, read the email, DM'd me, went back and forth a couple of minutes in the DMs, and they signed up for the course.
Boom.
Now, for me, that was the first time I was able to link the podcast, which is one form of content, to the email that was there waiting,
Mhm.
which is another form of content. He reached out via Instagram, which is in the DMs, which is another form of content. So without those three touch points, I may have not got that sale. I might have done, but that was the first time, because sometimes you'll send out emails and you won't know who reads it or who doesn't. You have to just assume that people are taking in what you're reading. But
Mhm.
that was the first time where it was like, well, Simon said years ago, do this. I wish, again, you can't wish you'd have done it sooner because I wasn't ready to, but it was like,
Yeah, yeah.
this, it works. And now that's gave me the motivation and the emphasis. Now I do two podcasts a week, or at least minimum one. I do two emails a week because I now see the value in the return. I post most days because
Mhm.
I now understand the value of doing that. So for me, that was one of the biggest challenges, was to allow myself to lend myself to multiple platforms to
Mhm.
be able to create a holistic kind of like orbit of I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here.
Yeah, and that's like a really important thing because essentially you're if you're going down the organic route, you're not doing ads and shoving your message in front of new people all the time and you're paying for the privilege of that. That going down the organic route is always a chipping away process. You're chipping away at getting people to trust you more. So the more value you put on your podcast, on your social media, in your emails or wherever, is you're building trust. You're chipping away at that. You're also probably chipping away at their objections. So if they've been burnt in the past by another coach who promised a lot and didn't deliver very, very much, again, over a period of time, they're getting confidence in you because you're chipping away at that whole thing. Part of the reason why you would, other than what you said about creating that like orbit of being kind of everywhere, another benefit of branching out into multiple platforms and different styles of content, be it podcasts, articles, emails, whatever, is that you chip away at a faster rate. If you take the podcast, for example, is the okay, so this podcast that we're recording right now, we're approaching like 40 minutes, right? So a 40-minute podcast has the potential to accelerate that process of someone, let's call it know, like, and trust is the usual phrase people use, than a 15-second reel. Like, it's just night and day difference about someone under getting to understand the way that you coach or the way that you explain things. That's very difficult in 15 seconds. Someone will get a real good idea of that. Whereas if they listen to you on their commute to work, on the tube or in the car or doing housework or whatever it is that people are doing, is that that's much easier for them to build that relationship. And then they're more inclined to then go and read those emails because they know who it is sending them and they now have that trust and they know that this email isn't going to be some sort of sleazy sales pitch, and they're going to look out for your content, interact with it because you've accelerated that relationship. So absolutely, being in multiple platforms allows you to kind of create those relationships, but it also accelerates that relationship as well, which I think is really, really important. Cool. So I'm gonna wrap up with one more question, which is basically going to be, what do you still struggle with now? If you had to put your finger on something and say, you know what, it's not quite there yet. What's been like the currently the biggest thing you're trying to overcome?
I think not be too salesy. Like,
Mhm.
I don't put calls to action, CTAs. I don't put calls to actions enough on a lot of my posts, a lot of the things that I do. And for me, that's one area where I won't say I'm leaving money on the table because I don't really like that term or phrase, but I recognize that if I were to advertise myself a little bit more, because I
Mhm.
genuinely am good at what I do, I probably would be more successful from a financial point of view. And
Mhm.
that's something that I'm working on and overcoming, because again, I've got, it's my own little hang up with not being too salesy or not being too selly. But as you just said, like, if I'm providing value for X amount of months across X amount of platforms, then I've earned the right to ask for a little bit more. So it's
Mhm.
just for me personally, being and becoming a little bit more comfortable with asking, but then also knowing that I can deliver on what I'm asking for. So
Mhm.
that would be the one of the things that springs to mind in terms of the not struggle, but the sticking point in me building my business to the next level.
Yeah. And I think like it's surprising to me about how many, obviously most of my audience, I say 90 to 95% of my audience are all online coaches, personal trainers, somewhere in that field. Surprisingly, how many of those people struggle with not just like a sales call, but the actual like pitch, like asking for something and not wanting to sound sleazy in that process. So you're not alone in that sort of thing. And, there are many different ways in which people can get around that sales, process. And if people go back to, this is going to be weird because I literally recorded the podcast before we came on, but it's going to be a couple of weeks before they hear this one. So you have to go back a couple of weeks and listen to the podcast I just recorded today. And I'll go through like, I think it's four different ways of more subtle sales without having the sales pitch. And like one of those things is you can be like really honest and you could go onto a story or something like that to sell something and say, "Hey, look, I I I hate sales. I find the whole thing incredibly uncomfortable, but I feel like if I don't tell you about this thing, then you'll probably miss out on this thing that's actually going to really help you be a better coach. So I'm doing something that's really uncomfortable right now. I'm going to sell this thing to you." And maybe you don't use those exact words, but that principle of saying like, okay, cool, I'm just going to be brutally honest with you here. Like, I don't want to sell this thing in a salesy way, so I'm just going to talk about it. And if you want it, here's a link. Go and find it. Sometimes that, with a few other little, maybe some sort of like persuasion things in there with a bit of scarcity or whatever, then that can work really, really well for people. And some people appreciate it because if you imagine like, I don't know, you scroll around Instagram and all these people singing and dancing about buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this. Someone who just comes on and say, "Hey, this sales thing's really awkward. But I think this might help you. So here's a link. Go and check it out if you want to do this." Then that might be the way to go. But I get it. And there's so many other people in the same boat as you. So
Yeah. So I'm glad that people won't see this for a couple of weeks because I'll probably have tried that so they can look back if they've seen my stories and then be like, ah, that's where you got that from.
there you
That'll be a
go.
nice little surprise for them.
There you go. Cool, man. So appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing your story. So obviously your main work in the online world is dealing with personal trainers, and your blueprint process is effectively helping them get a photo shoot style transformation themselves and learning the process so that they can do the same for their clients, plus mentorship on top and things like that. So, as a little bit of a parting thing, then maybe this is your chance to do a little sales pitch in a subtle way, and tell people where they can find out more about you and what you do online.
Yeah, so this whole sales thing is a little bit awkward for me, as you just know. Now you can find me predominantly on Instagram at Jewade Graham Coach, Jewade, or if you go into Simon's followers and just click JE, my name should come up first. If it doesn't, I'll be upset. But predominantly on Instagram, Jewade Graham Coach, and yeah, just if you have any questions, anything, if you're a coach as well, have any questions, just drop me a DM and we can see if I can help you in any way. But thanks for having me, man.
No worries. Cool, man. So I will speak to you no doubt on a coaching call sometime soon, but appreciate you being on.
Thanks.